if you show people that you're willing to be silly and be vulnerable and be real, they will start feeling more vulnerable, more present, more real. If you show them that, they will show it back to you. You're giving them freedom to be silly. When they see, a guy in his 50s get up on stage and be silly about something, make a joke about how bad of a college student I was, that humanizes, right? The joke that I made leans into Southern vernacular. I grew up in North Carolina. Some of your listeners from up north are probably going, wow, this guy sounds really country. What's funny is in North Carolina, they think I sound like I'm from up north. They always say, oh, where in Indiana are you from? I'm like, no, my mom's from Indiana, my dad's from Germany, but I'm from North Carolina. They said, but you don't sound. But from y'all's perspective up there, I probably sound pretty North Carolina. And so yeah, I think that reading the audience is in part about giving some vulnerability.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It's exciting because I get to meet people, and you travel the internet, and I guess that's the thing. You travel the internet, and you see this guy post about his new book on Facebook, and you're like, man, this is exactly the book I've been looking for my podcast. This is exactly what I need on my show. But will this person say yes? Because, I need this, and I'm hoping he'll say yes. And you're like, you send the post, and you wait. And then, bam, he says yes. And you're like, oh, okay. After a little happy dance, I get myself calmed down, and I realize that Alan's coming on the show to talk about his book, Improv Comedy and Leadership, all these things mashed up together. He'll tell you more about it, but I'm excited to have Alan here on the show. Alan, welcome to the podcast. I don't even know what to do. I don't know what to say. I'm leaning on you. Welcome in. Nice to have you here, bud.
I'm pumped. I'm excited to be here. And, I'm excited to talk about the book. It's something that it's been kind of a while in the making. And it's one of those rare combinations. I don't know if any of your listeners are of an age that remembers when Reese's peanut butter cups hit the scene. There's a world, and it's hard for me to conceive of this, but there's a world of people that remember before this was a thing. And there was this commercial, and right. I don't know if y'all remember the commercial. Somebody was walking down the street with chocolate, and then somebody else was walking down the street with an open jar of peanut butter, as one does.
Always.
Right? I mean, that's why I usually walk around downtown with an open jar of peanut butter. And they bumped into each other, and then one of them goes, "You got your chocolate in my peanut butter." The other one says, "You got your peanut butter in my chocolate." And Reese's peanut butter cups were born. And this book is that. This is this nerdy leadership guy that is me, that went all the way through a doctorate in leadership and wrote a dissertation about how do people teach people to be leaders and how do you measure all that. And someone who gets up on stage or got up on stage for about a decade. And if the audience said, hey, we want to see a scene about Beyonce arguing with the Pope about who has the higher score on Frogger or whatever we've come up with, you have to do that for your audience. And these worlds are as different as chocolate and peanut butter, but yet when you put it together, something kind of magical happens. And so I've been putting it together for clients that I serve for, 5, 6, 7 years. And I was like, maybe I should have a book about it. Maybe.
Right. Okay. So the one thing I love about improv is how connected and how immersed the audience is in what's happening on the stage, within the building, within the room. Yeah. You're not just a passive observer of what's going on. You're in it. Like you got some skin in the game.
You do. And that's one of the things that makes it a lot different from stand-up comedy. And I've tried stand-up comedy a few times, but it's terrifying because if everybody who knows stand-up comedians, you get up there and tell the jokes, and if the jokes are bad, that's on you.
Yeah.
But improv, because regularly we come to an audience and we say, what do you want this scene to be about? And if they come up with something that's a little out there, right? If they're like, we want to see a scene that's about the invention of pancakes and, corporate greed and trimming shears that are used in gardens, right. And whatever they've come up with, they, like you said, not only do they have skin in the game in terms of their attention, but they are partially responsible for the scene, right? They share responsibility with us. And so in some ways that makes it less scary than stand-up comedy because the audience is helping you build the scene. And so if the scene is bad, I don't want to say it's partially their fault, but it is partially their fault, right? If we're doing our job right, and if we're following the rules of improv and doing the right things for our team, it will work out. But they share some of the responsibility, and it makes it unique because they are co-creating the art with us, and that art exists for a second and then it goes away, and that's it. It's the one time it'll happen. Yeah,
It's a moment in time. My wife and I, years ago, we live near Toronto, and so we went to Second City, and they had Tony and Tina's wedding there for a period of time. And for those who have never seen that or been a part of that, it is, when you walk in, you don't realize the moment you walk through the doorway into the building, you're in the show as a participant. Yeah. You're not just watching from the stands. You're in the family. Like, my wife and I had no idea because people were coming up to us. We thought we were just being friendly. And they're like introducing us to cousin Vinny and his wife. And there's uncle, there's grandpa. Like, let's go see him. And we're like, and they usher us into this chapel. And we're sitting next to a gentleman who was in his 70s. And he's grandpa. And he's patting my knee saying, hey, how are you? Are you glad to be? This is so good that you're here for the wedding. And I'm realizing, wait a minute. Not only am I here to watch this, I'm actually a family member.
You're in it.
I became part of the show.
And
right?
Yeah.
It was so weird to be doing that.
And what's so brilliant about that setup is, think about weddings that many of us have attended. I mean, there's many weddings where I'm a friend of the bride or the groom, but most of the people there, I don't know.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to all kind of act like we're on the same page about it. And we are, right? But also, we don't know each other. We're sitting with strangers to celebrate somebody that we all have a connection to. But so, like, going to a wedding is kind of already an improv scene, whether you think about it that way or not, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in podcasting, and that's the one thing that I kind of really try to help people with is, how do we get the listener to be more actively present in the conversation? Because when I do an interview, like having time with you, I want people to feel like they're here with us and like they have some skin in the game, even though this was recorded in the past and they're listening to it in the future. But how do we bring people in to the conversation? Right.
Yeah. I think that one of the things, and I borrow as much from my sort of my keynote experience as my improv experience, but they are sort of one and the same. Like, when I'm doing a keynote on stage, the improv Alan, he's still there with me. Like, it's not like I get to turn that part of me off. But one of the things that I've learned that helps a good speech anytime you're speaking is when, number one, you talk about your own experience and you name it as your experience. So say things like, and I think I did this just a second ago. In my experience going to weddings, blah blah blah. So I'm personalizing it to me, and then I'm also inviting the listener. And I'm saying, and then I say to you, this might be part of your experience or might not. Where I'm not making any kind of judgment, no expectation. This might be, it might not be. But notice that every listener is going to be like, well, am I in the category where it is part of my experience or is not part of my experience? Right. And I give them this little on-ramp to, this might be part of your experience or it might not. And that prompts the listener to suddenly have to answer a question to themselves. Am I part of this experience or not? And guess what? If they need help discerning, okay, well, this thing he said, you might have this experience, you might not. They're going to listen more intently so that they can make a better decision, so they can categorize themselves. It's the same reason online personality tests are so enticing. It's like, I want to know more about myself, right? And so, like, it's one of those things where it's a trick, I guess, or a tactic, or just a method that I think good keynote speakers use. And I think it translates well to the podcast world because it number one, it avoids the generalizing can get us in trouble. All people are this, or no people are this, or all. Nah, the keys are, hey, in my experience. And then the other key is, and I'm curious about your experience. I wonder what your experience is like. You don't have to, your listeners in their cars or listening on their headphones, they can't actually answer, right? Yeah. But when you're speaking, you say, but I wonder about your experience with weddings. Whoever's listening to this right now is probably thinking about a wedding they attended.
Yeah.
And they're engaging in a different, and they might have a funny story from a wedding. And us saying, in my experience, it's this way, and I wonder what your experience is like, is making them wonder. And then all of a sudden, so there's some different ways to get people engaged, even when they are watching something in the future and cannot respond back,
Yeah. And then for Living in the Next Chapter, my author podcast, I get authors on the show and they're first-time guests. They've never been a guest. They've never talked about their process, their book. They are very comfortable writing on their own in solitude, away from humans. And then the moment that they're done writing, their publisher and PR people are like, great, Alan, awesome, great book. Now you got to go promote it. And good luck to you. And everybody leaves. And you're on your own to go out in front of the world and talk about something. And you don't have any training on how to get out in front of people and do this. So for people that are curious, Alan, would improv be a good tool to be a part of, to maybe unpack a little bit, maybe that part of you that you have never touched before?
Yeah, very much so. And so I spent 20 years working in colleges and universities, and something that you said taps into kind of some archetypes that we're used to, which is kind of the nerdy professor, right? If you think about a profile of most people who are dedicated enough to, if they're so deeply dedicated to the mating habits of honeybees in Western Ontario, right? Like if that's their passion area that they've gone that deeply, that's a certain level of nerddom that doesn't always match up with people who have the gift of gab or are good on camera, and I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying that you got to be comfortable, kind of like you said, when you're writing a book, it's a pretty solitary process. Writing sort of pulls in people with introvert preferences. And so my first book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, dives into some of the Jungian typology of extroversion and introversion a little bit as it relates to leadership. But overwhelmingly, writing a book is a process that celebrates introverts and doesn't celebrate extroverts, if that makes sense. Introverts can get a certain emotional charge from it that people with extrovert preferences aren't going to get as much, right?
Yeah.
So similarly, if writing tends to just invite in people with more introvert preferences, and then they have to do a PR thing where they have to go, and there are professionals, you know this, there are professionals who work with higher profile authors because they're about to go on the Colbert Show, or they're going to go on the Kimmel Show, or they're going to go on whatever the talk show is that they're promoting their book, and to prep them on how to talk, to prep them on how to do an interview, because if they are sort of bookwormish in their soul, right? And again, I'm not saying anybody can or can't. I'm saying that, a certain type gravitates towards writing. That getting that extra skill, and improv is amazing. As a matter of fact, the improv troupe where I learned, we had a British literature professor, we had a geology professor. The owner of the club had a PhD in neurobiology from this up-and-coming university called Duke University. Joking about being an up-and-coming, it's one of the top ones in the U.S. And so I think that there is that when it comes to any public speaking, and for them, for the British literature guy, or for the geology guy, I'm sure he became a better teacher from doing improv, right? Anytime you have to speak to another person, but the capacity to listen more deeply is at the root of improv. The capacity to take what someone says in new directions is at the root of improv. And so there's these techniques that you learn in improv that, if you utilize in these other spaces, can be powerful.
Does improv attract extroverts and cause introverts to run for the hills? Like what's going on there? I'm kind of an introvert, just so you know, but I love improv. I just love watching, being a part of it. But is there kind of an attraction and a thing going on here?
I think there can be. And so that's interesting because I got certified in the Myers-Briggs many, many years ago, which is where we get the language of extroversion and introversion.
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting, and I'm going to zoom out from improv for just a second, is that in theater and in television and in movies, you would be surprised how many people with introvert preferences go into those industries, specifically because people with introvert preferences tend to love the confines of a role. And if they're given a role, this is your role. You're playing villager number 7, or you're playing Persephone, or you're playing Hamlet, or whatever it is. You're playing a character. You're playing the Phantom of the Opera. You're playing a character. And so that character gives people with introvert preferences license to be externally focused and focus energy and talking and all of these things externally, because they have the safety of this role. Well, if you zoom back over to improv comedy and stand-up comedy, in stand-up comedy, you can build a persona and make a role, but you have to make your own. And so I think that attracts a lot more people with extrovert preferences. With improv comedy, I think that you can have a role. You make up roles on the spot. But the other thing I think that might attract a few more people with introvert preferences, because many people with introvert preferences wouldn't want to go on stage, would be terrified. Like, I get it. 100%, I get it. But for those who do think, yeah, I'm going to try this new thing, I'm going to try it. I think that the confines of having a team, you're never doing it by yourself. You're never doing it by yourself. In every comedy club I've ever seen improv done, it's a team activity. And that can provide some relative comfort as well. And so the fact that I just talked about sort of the team aspect of it, and then also people with introvert preferences being more comfortable sometimes with a role. I don't know if you picked up on this. We've gone from talking about improv to talking about leadership, right? We like, in other words, I literally talk to leaders and managers and vice presidents sometimes, and I say, I know on your team you've got some people with introvert preferences that might have gotten passed over for the last promotion, or might not be getting as much attention. Have you thought about giving them a role, leading a committee, leading a project, where the confines of that role is going to build their confidence in this external thing that the extrovert people do all the time anyway, and help get them noticed, help get them attention. And so it's fascinating how much overlap there is between these worlds. Yeah.
So the word leader and leadership in your book title, what leader is this book for? Who is kind of your target audience from a leader's perspective?
Yeah. So the two leaders I work with the most are what some people call the C-suite. I don't love the term C-suite, but it's the vice presidents, vice presidents within your organization. And then the second group is what I call the emerging leaders. And so a lot of mid-level managers. And the reason it's for those two audiences is because the first audience, whenever I'm dealing with vice presidents and I go to a workshop, and sometimes it's a brief 3-hour workshop, or sometimes it's a 5-day workshop. There's all kinds of formats. But when I'm doing work with the vice presidents, over and over and over again, I hear them say, gosh, I wish I had known this 10 years ago. And I'm like, great. Hold that thought. Who in your organization might be sitting in your chair in 10 years? Because we all think about ourselves, our own career trajectory, our own leadership skills. But how many of us are regularly thinking about, well, who's the next generation? How much am I investing in the next generation? And one other thing I'll tell you just from leadership training is vice presidents who actively go mentor the next generation of leaders become better leaders themselves, because they're having to deconstruct what makes leadership work and not work. They're having to be real about their own failures and their own successes to someone they're trying to mentor so they can mentor them effectively. And in the process, they're doing some reflection that makes them a better leader for everyone they're leading, right? And so it's sort of like that, when you teach something, you know it better, right? And so, my book is very much oriented towards vice presidents and then also mid-level, or what I call emerging leaders. The last chapter is kind of specially for vice presidents, which is about executive presence or leadership presence, because vice presidents regularly have to stand up in a room and address a room, and they've got notes, and the notes have been pre-vetted and et cetera. But then they have to sometimes answer questions. They have to do some improv, right? And so the question is, how do you hone those skills to have that leadership presence when it comes to being in front of a group? That's kind of the last chapter, is a little bit extra towards those executives. Yeah.
It's interesting, because like my wife works at a warehouse setting, came in as a regular employee, worked her way up to being a leader of the team. And then she's put in front of the team, and it's like, it's Friday, time for our team meeting. Here's 40 people staring at you. Now you're leading the meeting. Yesterday, you were an employee. Now you're the boss. Yep. Go. And she's like, who trains me how to do this, to speak in front of all these people, right? Okay, you're my peers, and now I'm your boss. And now I'm supposed to come up with something off the top of my head and lead a team. I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't been trained for this, right?
That's why I have a job, man. That's why I have a job because people get sometimes they get specialized training. Maybe they're in the engineering sector or education sector or manufacturing, or they're in they're in arts, or they're in technology or whatever. But there's this thing in business circles, and I never got a business degree, but I've heard about this thing called the Peter Principle. And this is a really fascinating idea. The idea is that each person sort of has a best role for them within your organization, and sometimes you're promoted past the role where you belong.
Right.
And so if usually you take your best assistant manager and make him a manager because it's your best assistant manager. But if you step back from that, if you zoom out from that and listed, what are the top 10 things an assistant manager needs to be good at? And then zoomed over to the other list, what are the top 10 things a manager needs to be good at? It might be way different things. Your assistant manager might be customer facing, client facing, and your manager is employee facing and budget facing and HR facing. and the tasks that, I mean, I was an assistant director of a department in a university, and then I became a director. And oh my gosh, nobody called a timeout and said, hey man, go do some leadership training for a year so you can learn how to lead people. No one did that. And it sounds like with your wife, similar experience. No one's like, hey, before you start leading, we're going to get you some training on this, because you might be a whiz at computer chip manufacturing, right? Yeah. You might be a whiz at food and beverage. You know, one of my clients is a flavor company, right? So you might be an amazing flavor chemist. But if you have to lead all the other flavor chemists, maybe you should, get some training about that. And so so the reason, and the Peter principle is, again, we always take the best assistant manager and make them the manager, even though maybe that's not the right move.
Right. Yeah. It's awkward. And if you don't feel like you have the right gifts and talents and experience and knowledge, that you're going to fail. You're just like, I don't feel I'm equipped to do this role, even 100%. Though I've worked hard to get here.
100%.
We need more training. We need more resources, right? And that's where your book comes in. We can use that as a resource, right?
You can totally use it as a resource. And what it does is it kind of, each chapter I start with a little vignette. It describes a scene, an improv scene, where I introduce you to some characters, and the scene has got Les and Jen and Renke and me, and we're on stage, and and so the beginning of each chapter is me just describing the improv scene, and some of them are hilarious. Some of them are so funny. And then the rest of the chapter, I'm able to go, okay, well, so in that scene, part of what made it funny was this person didn't listen to this person. Well, let's talk about, you're right. Let's talk about that in the workplace. Let's talk about strategies for how to do that better. Let's talk about the difference between listening and active listening. Like, what's the difference between listening and active listening, right? And so, I start each section with a little vignette. That's it. That's an improv scene. And so I had a lot of fun recreating this, because none of them are actual scenes I did on stage. They're all combinations of, because I'd started improv, I think, in 2012 and stopped doing it in 2021. So about 9 years. And so I cannot tell you how many improv scenes I did in 9 years. Like it's all a giant blur. But I remember my teammates and what they were good at. And so that shows up in this book a lot, is that certain of my teammates were really, really good at playing. Like there's this one guy, and he played Terry the plumber, and Terry the plumber was from Chicago. And when he was Terry the plumber, I felt like Terry the plumber might have been at my house, and he might have been like fixing my pipes recently, right? Terry the plumber. And so, he knows what a good Chicago dog is and what good Chicago pizza is. And he knows that New York don't know Jack, right? Yeah. And so, so he becomes Terry the plumber, right? And so, there's just this. So as I wrote the book, I got to have that kind of the imagination of, what if I could build the dream scene with these amazingly talented folks who I got to do improv with, and capitalized on the best things that they did. And then sometimes the scenes are works of art, and I take that into the chapter, and sometimes they go off the rails, and I take that into the chapter. So, yeah.
Right. This whole active listening thing is so important in podcasting. It's so important in leadership.
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
The active listening. Yeah. Right. You did it. I love it. Perfect. Because one thing I notice is for podcasters, they'll have a guest on. They'll ask you a question, and you'll answer the question. And right near the end of the question, you'll say something like, and that's the day I woke up in an emergency room. And without missing a beat, it's like, okay, question number 3, what's your favorite color? And as a listener, I'm like, wait, whoa. Go back to the emergency room. What are you doing? You didn't even acknowledge it. It just went right past, and we never come back to the story. And I feel like I missed something in the conversation, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes it's nervousness, right? Because I want to get through my questions. I got Alan. He's a great guy. I really want to do this, but I'm just so tied to my questions I'm not even listening to. I got to get through this list, right? Yeah.
And the example you gave was great of, they end one answer and they end it with, and then the next day I woke up in the hospital, or that day I woke up in the hospital. Yeah. And then the next question is about your favorite color. Yeah. But what can be even worse is if the next question is, so did you wake up in the hospital one day, where like the person's already answered the question, and then the next question, you can tell they're not listening. Yeah. And so part of this is, and so, going back to, so I have a previous book again, and I've done a lot of work on personality type. Part of this is different personality types are more attached to lists than others, right? And so besides extroversion and introversion, there's other things in the Jungian psychology framework that I talk about that like my wife has a to-do list, and she has what I would call a relationship with her to-do list. I have a to-do list, and it's a tool, and I don't care about it any more than I care about a screwdriver. It's just a tool. It's a to-do list. I do it so that I don't forget things, but I don't have a relationship with it. At no point do I ever do something that should have been on the list, retroactively add it, even though I've done it, retroactively add it so I can have the joy of marking it off. I don't do that, but my wife does. And that is the last letter of the Myers-Briggs. Some people know the judging versus perceiving. And that's another thing that factors into being present, factors into the active listening, because one of those personality preferences is going to have a harder time learning to active listen, and the other one's going to have an easier time. Same with extroversion and introversion. Extroverts can learn to be active listeners. It's just harder.
Yeah.
Introverts can learn to be active listeners. They're not all, one of the myths that extroverts think all introverts are great listeners. And I tell them, like, nah, dude, half of them are just thinking about the book that they're reading or the show that they're watching or getting together with their best friend. They're not actually listening to you, but you think they're listening to you because they're not talking. And so that's one of those little interesting myths. And I just totally lost my train of thought there. But yeah, I think that the active listening thing, I think the other piece of it is, if I can get leadership nerdy for a second.
Yeah, let's go.
Listening is one skill. And like I said, I think people with introvert preferences can learn that one faster, and people with extrovert preferences, it's harder to learn. Everyone can learn it, but But the second skill that leaders need is making people feel heard.
Yeah.
This is a whole different skill. And in that skill, the people with the extrovert preferences are actually have an easier time learning it, because it's about the external processing. It's about, hey, I heard you. Hey, I got you. I understand what you're saying. I hear you. I get you. That external affirmation. Many people who I know who are leaders who have an introvert preference, they're awesome listeners, but their team doesn't think they're good listeners because they don't add that little bow on it. They don't throw one little extrovert nugget out there. Oh, I heard you. That was a great idea. They don't acknowledge that they're hearing. They hear, they listen, but they don't externally share that they're listening. And that's a separate skill set. It's a separate skill set. And so it's amazing how listening to someone and actively listening to them is one skill set, but then making them feel heard is a whole separate skill set. And leaders need both of those. Leaders need both of them. Yeah.
Go to your next convention, conference, and you walk up to somebody you admire, somebody you read their book, you've heard their podcast, whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, Alan, I can't believe it's you. And the whole time I'm talking to you, Alan's doing this. He's looking past me to the person behind me back in the corner they want to go talk to later. But here I am going, oh, Alan, your book is amazing. I'm now into improv. And you're just looking right past me, right? That's active listening right there. The person's in front of you. They're there to connect. Right. So whether it's in an interview on Zoom, whether it's in person or on stage as an improv, you want that connection. You don't want to be looking away from the audience in front of you, right?
It's huge. It's huge. And I think I mentioned I used to run a career development center, and I also work with a nonprofit in my city that works with out-of-work adults who've lost their jobs. And we do career coaching, right? And part of that's job interviews. And we talk about eye contact. And that eye contact is more symbolic than it is functional. We think of it as functional, right? That you're looking at the person. But it's a symbol to the person that I am present with you. It's a symbol of presence. And so the scenario you're talking about where someone's sort of looking past you because they're trying to find the next person, they're trying to network, they're trying to ladder climb, whatever. It's hilarious because my wife thinks I'm a good networker and I do not network. I do things that I think someone outside might look at and say, that's networking. I try to find connection with awesome people doing awesome things. And then if I find a good connection, I try to get in on the awesome people and the awesome things. And we do that. So it's connection. It's not ladder climbing networking. And I'll give you a great example. When I was a young professional, I used to work at what's called student affairs, which for your listeners, if you've ever gone to a college or a university, all the things that happen outside the classroom, the residence halls, the student union, the campus activities group, the multicultural center, this whole world, that was my profession for 20 years. And there are times when, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought again, Dave. That's twice. I wonder if I need a snack. What were we just talking? Rewind me to what we were just talking about.
Just that connection with people and listening to them.
The networking.
Right?
Yeah. So when I was new in my profession, this young grad student named Zach, called me in my office, said, I'm a graduate student. Can I come interview you to learn about, real working in the real world after this graduate? He was getting a similar graduate degree to me. Can I come do an informational interview with you for an hour? And I'm like, sure, that's great. Come on over, because I want to help the next generation.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to network. I'm not trying to gain anything. I'm already into my career. He's kind of not in his career yet, but we made a connection, and then we connected on LinkedIn, and then eventually he went on and got a doctorate. And I was like, congratulations. And eventually. And 2 years ago, he gets a job at a university about an hour and a half from my house as a dean of something. And he knows that I do consulting and leadership development work. And he's like, hey man, we need some help. Can you come work with my team? And I got a client out of that.
Wow.
That's opposite of I'm at a conference and I'm looking to shake the hand of the biggest name.
Yeah.
In other words, the biggest name that you think that you're trying to find at the conference has 100 other people trying to meet them.
Yeah.
What if you just invested in awesome people who were going to become big names in the future and you just knew it?
Yeah.
And that, in other words, networking for their benefit first, and it's not even networking. It's just finding connections. And so I had no idea that me being kind to this scrawny grad student who stumbled into my office, who was just wanted to talk to a professional who was in the field, who, had a master's degree or whatever, and that we would stay a little bit connected here and there over the years. And that eventually his university was writing me checks for working with their faculty and staff, you know? Yeah.
One other element of improv and being up in front of an audience that's very interesting, because I was watching your TEDx talk. And your TEDx talk is a different platform than stand-up and comedy, but there was still elements of you where the crowd was actually speaking up. They're usually quiet for the most part at TEDx, but there were people kind of doing like a call and response with you while you're talking about, where your father, your family member, and serving in the pharmacy and having the food and all that. And people are like, oh, I know that place and I know that place. People were actually feeling comfortable enough with you on that stage to respond to you. Right? Yeah. That was really interesting. Right?
It is interesting because, and I felt kind of bad about it actually, because that TEDx event was multiple speakers. I think there might've been 10 of us. And I felt a little bad because I was a pretty accomplished keynote speaker already, but for many of these TEDx speakers, they had a brilliant idea, but this might've been their first time really speaking. Right. Yeah. And going through TEDx is great because they get some coaching, etc. When I went to get my coaching, the person doing the coaching at the end was like, well, could I call you for some coaching? Like it was this weird thing where I went because I'm supposed to check that box and do the coaching. And then at the end, they were like, well, dude, I don't know if you need this. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I do, but I'm always happy to meet someone cool. Right. And so for the TEDx thing, that call and response thing, what that making yourself vulnerable on stage, making yourself accessible, making yourself human. So one of the jokes that I led with was that it took me 7 years to finish college. In the US, it takes 4 typically for people, but 7 years. And when I finished, my GPA was 2.16, which is a C average. And I said, so a lot of my friends graduated magna cum laude and summa cum laude. I just graduated thank the laude, like leaning into like this Southern accent thing, right? And that got a laugh. But besides getting a laugh, what I was doing was I was saying to them, because the slide said Dr. Alan Mueller, right? The slide tells it's like the last 3 minutes of a Rocky movie, right? I mean, like where Rocky's the champion, right? Or whatever. So when you put Dr. Alan Mueller on a slide up there, it's like, oh, he's made it. And I'm like, well, and I still have bad days, and I still get heartburn sometimes, and I still stub my toe, and like, I used to imagine, But so the call and response thing, I felt a little bad because most of my cohort, they didn't get that, and it's not because of presentation skills. I think it's part because of the improv thing. Because when you've done improv, one of the things that other speakers don't know is that if you go off script, it can still be amazing.
Right.
And so most people have a belief that if I go off script, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
If I go off script, it's a mistake. As an improv person, you learn quickly. If you go off script, it's an opportunity. And so there are literally in that TEDx talk, there was about a 60-second section that was never, ever, ever in my script or notes that I did contemporaneously in the moment when the cameras were rolling and the live audience was there. There was a part I added in because I felt it. And in part because that joke I just told about, summa cum laude and that joke I told landed in a certain way. The story I told a story about the sit-in movement. And for those who are unfamiliar, the 30-second version is that brave Black people in North Carolina were working to integrate a whites-only lunch counter, and they faced all kinds of opposition and danger and threat. And eventually the lunch counter got desegregated and everyone could eat there. But it was because of this brave movement. And I'm telling that story. And as I tell that story, I'm listening to the audience and listening to their energy, etc. And through that, I knew I could throw in this contemporaneous thing that was not planned at all. It was not planned. I went totally off script, totally off book, something I've thought before that I don't know if I've ever said to anybody out loud, threw it in. And I don't think the average viewer would have any sense of that. I think the average viewer as a matter of fact, if you want to watch it again and see if you can find the 60-second part, it probably is going to be hard to find. But yeah, and so I think that's one of the things. And if you're thinking about folks who do podcasts, right? And some folks who run podcasts, I'm sure, are most comfortable with a script, and that's great, right? Mm-hmm. But you can, if things go off script, you can either let your emotions take hold and go, oh, we're off script, and that's not right, and I want to stay on script because that script gives me some comfort and some safety. Yeah. Or you can think, hey, I wonder if going off script might actually be a blessing, might be an awesome treasure, might be something that we uncover that we didn't think we were going to uncover before. And I wonder if I could go with it. I wonder if I could even actively listening enough to just ask a follow-up question that's not the next question on my list. And so part of this, again, this intersects with the personality side. And I know this session that we're doing is not about personality, but there are certain personality types in the Myers-Briggs. There's sort of 16 types. There are certain ones of those that love the script. They feel comforted by the script. And I teach exercises that are sort of improv in nature. Well, and I can tell your audience, if you're a podcaster who loves your script and feels a little uncomfortable when things go off script, one activity you could do is next time you are at a restaurant or looking at a menu online, do a decision tree until you just get bored to tears. In other words, like, okay, where should I get Chinese food or Italian food? Okay, if I got Italian, would I get a stromboli or a pizza? Okay, if I got a pizza, would I get cheese or pepperoni? If I got a stromboli, would I get feta or would I get this? Hey, wait a second. If I got Chinese, would I go this place or this place? And follow it 2 decisions per decision point. Follow it as far down the rabbit hole as you can go. And for people who really, really, really love scripts, if you do this silly exercise I just mentioned 2, 3, 4 times a week, the next time something comes out of left field, something doesn't go according to plan, your brain is going to be like, you know what? You know what I did 2 days ago is I spitballed and brainstormed how many different Italian combinations I could make of Italian food. So I've practiced leaning into lots of possibilities very quickly. And the fact that we're off script isn't as scary now. It's not as scary now.
I like that. A big part of improv as well is reading the room, kind of what you're alluding to, right? Mm-hmm. So, because when I watch Whose Line Is It Anyway, for example, the audience, they'll have something they're doing a props or something in front of the audience, but then they'll stop and they'll just look at the audience. And the audience is like, oh, I get this joke. No words were said, but the audience is like, oh, yeah. Right? Wait, no words, but the audience is like, they anticipate what should go in there. And that kind of back and forth, and pulling them up on stage, putting a hat on somebody, and now you're this, right? Is just reading the room, right? And that's the one thing I noticed for your TEDx. You read the room in real time, right? Yeah. That's not a skill that everybody has, right?
No, it's not.
So how does improv help somebody to understand how to read the room when you're standing in front of a group of people next time?
Well, so for one thing, you practice a lot reading your scene partners. And
Yeah.
so you get to, because improv, if we're doing our show on Saturday night, we're having practice
Right.
Tuesday. It's
Yeah.
not rehearsal because there's no lines, there's no script, but we're practicing with our scene partners and reading their nonverbals, right?
Mhm.
So one thing that's interesting, a little side note, but when I taught a class called Improv Comedy and the Art of the Job Interview, I worked at a small Quaker college in the South of the United States, and I taught that class, which was a lot of fun. One thing I learned, I just mentioned facial expressions and nonverbals. We had a very, very high number of autistic students at our college.
Mhm.
And we were known in the autistic community as an autism-friendly college, and it was fantastic. And the first time a few autistic students signed up for my improv class, I was scared. I had some biases I had to unpack
Yeah.
or whatever, because I was used to getting a letter from the dean's office, this student needs a distraction-free environment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is an improv class. We could call it Distraction 101, right? But one of the things I learned, and this is mind-blowing, is those students were by far the best improvisers of everyone, because they weren't too caught up in whether or not I'm looking silly, right? And so the reading the room thing that you mentioned, if you show people that you're willing to be silly and be vulnerable and be real,
Yeah.
they will start feeling more vulnerable, more present, more real. If you show them that, they will show it back to you. They will.
Yeah.
You're giving them freedom to be silly. When they see a guy in his 50s get up on stage and be silly about something, make a joke about how bad of a college student I was, that humanizes, right? The joke that I made leans into Southern vernacular. I grew up in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And some of your listeners from up north are probably going, wow, this guy sounds really country. What's funny is in North Carolina, they think I sound like I'm from up north. They always say, oh, where in Indiana are you from? I'm like, no, I'm from, my mom's from Indiana, my dad's from Germany, but I'm from North Carolina. They said, but you don't sound, but from y'all's perspective up there, I probably sound pretty North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that reading the audience is in part about giving some vulnerability. One other thing I'll mention, and this, I hope this is okay to talk about, but like gender and race, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm always aware of as a white guy is I actually think to myself when I go on stage, I think to myself, if I can win over women who happen to also be Black, who happen to also be introverted, then I will have done a successful keynote speech.
Mm.
And it's not that demographic is particularly special for me. It's that I'm not Black, I'm not a woman, and I'm not an introvert.
Yeah.
And when I think about some of the things that make me the most me, the fact that I'm a man and I'm white and I'm an extrovert, those are pretty fundamental pieces of me. And so when I go on stage, when I address a group, I think to myself, if I can make sure that I reach that person who is different from me on three very fundamental ways, my gender, my race, and how I build my energy, if I can reach them, everyone else is going to come along for this keynote and have a good. So the other thing is I have anchors in the audience, and it's not just those identities, because I'm trying to be aware of, and this is one of the things I'm not that good at, is like ableist language and that kind of stuff. I'm learning. We're all learning. But so I try to anchor myself to people who I know are a lot different than me, because if I can connect with them, everything else is going to flow. Everything else is going to rock.
That's super smart. I love that. I love that a lot. Let's wrap up because I know you got to go for lunch. You got lunchtime coming up. This is great.
Got some lunch.
Let's put it in context of your love letter to a reader for this book.
Yes.
If we can summarize it down, and I want you to talk to them. I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to go sit with everybody else. Your love letter for this book, for the right person, I want you to talk to them. Just they're going to replace me in my seat right now. Explain this book to me. Why do I need this? What's your heart for us as a reader?
Yeah.
Just go. This is you.
Yeah.
Please.
So here's the thing. I've been a leader when I thought I was a leader. I've been named a leader and not led. And leadership is scary and lonely. And leadership requires you to make decisions every day. And you feel like those decisions are being scrutinized. And I get it because I have been there, and it's scary. And people turn to leaders for answers, and they keep coming to you for answers. And that just compounds the stress. And you feel like I have to have the answers because that's what leaders do. Improv flips the script on that, my friends. Improv says, when someone comes to you and says, what's the answer to this? Just say, I don't know. But you know what? We're about to build a scene where we're going to find out, right? And we're not actually going to do improv here in the office. Don't worry. But we're going to use improv mindset, the yes and. Yes, that's a problem. And we're going to figure out how to solve it. I don't know how yet, but we're going to do that. And if you could unlock that level of authenticity, which you have to have on the improv stage, but you don't have to have as a leader, but the leaders who do it are very, very accomplished in terms of getting their teams to come along. If you can really, really model that I don't know yet, and that yes and, those two things from improv world, that's it right there. That's it right there. Yeah.
Excellent.
So read the book, and the good thing about the book is you'll get to laugh some, and then you'll get to scratch your head some. And if you get to laugh and then scratch your head and then laugh and then scratch your head, before you know it, you've got a really cool viral dance you can put on TikTok.
Perfect. I love it. Where do we want to go? Where do we want to send people? I want to connect with you, get the book, all that great stuff. Come on.
Yeah. So my website is adaptivechallengeconsulting.com, adaptivechallengeconsulting.com. You can find adaptivechallengeconsulting.com on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, but also on LinkedIn. If you're listening, find Alan Mueller, AlanMueller, Alan Mueller on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. I do work all over with all kinds of teams. And on my website, if you're curious about the book is available there. And the book will be on Amazon within the next month or two. So October 2025, it will also be available on Amazon and Kindle. But right now it's available for pre-order on my website. And my old book, my other book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, is available on Amazon and also currently available on my site as well. So I'd love to connect with folks. Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you so much for making time to be on the show to unpack this with us together. Thank you for getting me on the act of listening. That was very funny. And I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. It's great, Alan. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee. Okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5 kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.